Hey everyone, welcome back to my Roguelike and Godot for Complete Beginner series. Today, we're pretty much just going to be making the health bar and XP bar for our player that'll always show up at the top of the screen. This is going to be pretty similar to what we did with our swordsman character and how he has this health bar floating around the top of his head. However, for the player, we're going to do like Vampire Survivors does and just have a bar right up top here. I will forewarn you that this is not necessarily going to be a beautiful addition to our game. But this will generally show how you want to make UI that isn't always attached right to the player. Like if you ever had any UI that you wanted to stay stationary on your screen, regardless of where the player was going on the screen or anything like that, I'll show you how to have that locked like right in place. First thing we want to do is add a control node. Having a plain control node as a parent lets you sort of set the boundary of the control node. And we just want to expand this to be the size of our entire screen, just in case we wanted some UI to be down at the bottom or the top. And then what we can do is with our other control nodes, we can anchor them into certain positions on the screen so that if there was any scaling or resizing of the screen, they would all of your UI elements would remain in the same spot. Since our game is always going to be this size, it doesn't really matter for us, but I think it's still worth seeing. So once we've got our control node, for our player today, we are going to be adding a health bar, an XP bar, and a label that will display what level our player is. So let's go ahead and add in all those things. Just like we did with our enemy, I'm going to take this progress bar, stretch it out about here, maybe looks good, whatever you're kind of feeling. I'm going to turn off the show percentage, but I'm going to leave it probably about this big because you want it to stand out enough to your player. And then if you wanted this to always show up in the top left, what you can do is go into these anchor presets and anchor it to the top left. Now, if for whatever reason your control node gets resized, which would probably be your player changing their screen resolution, your control node is always going to be right there. I'm going to go ahead and call this one health bar, and I'm going to add in another progress bar. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller and move it out some. It's going to be our XP bar. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a label and call it our level label. And then just for reference for how it'll look, I'm going to go ahead and put level, I don't know, 50 just to see. And I see that it's kind of overlapping with our XP bar some, so I'm just going to nudge this out a little bit farther. And that looks good to me. And then I want to change the colors of our progress bar because these default grays are really ugly to me. So again, to do that, we are going to go down to our theme overrides, styles, and we're going to put in new style boxes. Rather than trying to match this red perfectly, I'm going to go ahead and just grab it from here. So I'm going to go into our style box, and I'm going to look at the color, and it is 255 red, 00 on everything else. So then we could just go back in here for our fill color. Now I'm going to do the same thing with our XP bar. I kind of like XP being a little bit of a purpley color. It's my just personal preference. You can make it whatever you like. Okay, so that looks about right to me. Now I want to make sure that these are touching but not overlapping. So I'm going to turn off my grid snapping and just move it up. Make sure that this one is in line with it. Maybe leave a little bit of room between here. Like I said, this is certainly not the prettiest solution. In your own game, you're probably going to have some custom textures for this, but the asset pack that we have doesn't have anything like that. And I don't want to have to make you guys go out and grab more stuff. So we'll just stick with this, but just keep in mind for your own game, it's probably not going to be quite this ugly. Also something to note, it's not necessarily the best that this is 100% opaque. If you want to be able to see stuff underneath it, we can change its opacity just a little bit to make it a little bit more see-through. If you go into, I believe it's visibility, and then under modulate, we have this alpha value, and this will change like how much you can see through it. If you're worried about stuff getting lost behind it, you can, of course, turn this alpha value down a little bit. I guess I'll just leave mine there. It seems reasonable. Also, this white text might not be super visible on our background, so we can also definitely change the color of that. Or what you could do, you could add a texture rect right here behind it, or a panel, and just put this right in line with sort of where your level bar is, and we'll make sure that it renders before the label, so that way the text will be visible on top of it. Oh, I lied. We don't want a texture rect. We don't have a texture. We want a color rect. And then we could just make this a dark color. That might make it look kind of weird with the bar. If you wanted to choose a different color, go for it. I'm really not too concerned with the visuals of our game, as this is really just a coding tutorial, and I want to show you how to program these things in. Probably in future videos, I can go over how to make these things a little bit more aesthetic. I don't think I explained this part particularly well, but we added these control nodes as a child of our main level, because if they were children of our player, when our player would move, the bars would move with the player. Anytime you have a parent node, which in this case is our main level or our player, everything that is a child of that parent node has its transform or its on-screen position tied to the parent. So like the sprite, we're not actually moving the sprite. We're moving the player, and the sprite is following the player that we're moving, okay? Because it is a child of the player. So if we put our health bar as a child of our player, it would work just like our swordsman, where this health bar follows him around. And since we always want our health bar to be at the top of our screen, regardless of where our player is on the screen, we need some other way to keep it in place. The easiest way to do that is to tie it to something in our scene that isn't moving, which is the scene itself. So that in and of itself is a pretty simple solution. The only complication that adds is obviously the health and XP value are coming from the player. So it would be nice if we could have those bars attached to the player, because the values are just right there and we could pass it back and forth. So doing this just adds the minor and very minor complication that we need to pass data from our player to the level scene, so that the level can update our health bar and our XP bar accordingly. So the very first thing that we're going to want to do is get access to all of these variables in our level script. So click on your level, click on your script, and we're going to add some on-ready vars like we have here. I'm going to make a player health bar, and then of course we just need to get access to it with our $sign, and I'm going to do the same for our XP bar and our level label. So now we have access to all of these. And remember what I said in the last video, where we're trying to follow the programming structure of call up, signal down. So that means that any child of level is allowed to do whatever it needs to do in the level script, call whatever it needs to do, and that's considered safe because we know that the level's always going to be there. Therefore, the player won't call a function that doesn't exist or try to change a variable that doesn't exist and crash your game. So since now all of these variables exist in levels global space, our player can actually have access to those through current scene. I also want us to go ahead and type current scene as level, because that's going to give us more visibility in our editor for what we have access to, okay? When we put everything in a class, it puts it up in that global namespace, and then the editor is actually able to recognize all of the variables that you have within that class, and you can see them more clearly in other places. So if, for example, we wanted to set our player's HP into our current scene's health bar, we can just take current scene, and then you see now we have access to player health bar, and we can just set values directly from our player, basically calling up to our current scene. So just to test, I can take current scene dot player health bar dot value, and I'll say that it equals 80. And then we call set stats right at the beginning, so it should happen. Okay, it crashed because I'm a little dumb, and we tried to set the stats before we actually got access to our current scene. And then one last thing, we need to await current scene dot ready before we try to call this. Basically, what'll happen is if you don't await our current scene dot ready, our set stats get called, and then we try to run these things on our health bar. But in our level 1, our control nodes are lower than our player in our scene tree, which is good because we want our player to render underneath of our UI. Your UI should always be like the last thing on the bottom of your control node or of your scene tree. However, what that means for your ready functions is that everything in player ready is going to happen before everything in like the ready of these objects here. So even though level 1 has access to these Their internal readies haven't been called. They're not instantiated yet. And if we try to do anything with them, the game thinks that they don't exist yet, because they don't exist at that exact moment of them being called. So what you want to do is, since we have access to our current scene, we're going to use a wait, which will pause your code exactly where it is until a certain signal is emitted. Every built-in scene has a signal called ready. So once the ready function is run, once it gets to the bottom and does everything within ready, it will emit the signal ready. So we're going to wait for our current scene to have everything ready, including this control bar, before we proceed, and then call our set stats, which will then move our health bar up to a value of 80, okay? So now we need to actually have HP and XP values to set those bars to. So why don't we go ahead and give our player a base HP. I suppose we can make these all floats. Scaling might get weird. Yeah, base HP, a max HP, and a current HP. And then for XP, we need to have some sort of target value that we're leveling up towards. And then we need to have whatever our current value is. So I'm going to call it target XP. And then we're going to have a current XP and a current level. We have to be careful about how we name these things. Maybe we'll just call it player level. And we know that'll be an int. Oh, and don't forget to put an E here. You're going to want to keep your naming schemes constant. All right, so now that we've got these base stats, we're going to go ahead and set them in our set stats function. And we might do something a little bit more complicated with them later, but right now we're pretty much just going to be assigning some dummy values. We're going to go ahead and just start our player off at level 1. We'll probably want that information to come in from our level later on, where we'll have, like, in between levels, our player will probably, like, save the stats somewhere, and then our level will, like, load those stats in, so that as it stands right now, if I set player level equal to 1 right now, every time I go into a new level, the player's ready function is going to get called, and then they're going to have their stats reset every time. So this is certainly a short-term solution. And we know that our current XP is going to be 0, and I'm going to set our base HP to 10. So then in our set stats function, we need to say our max HP. Again, like with the swordsman, we're probably going to come up with something a little bit more complicated than this, but I'm just going to set it to our base HP, and then I'm going to set our current HP to our max, and then I'm going to say our target XP. For now, we can just say something simple like it's going to equal our player level times, and then I'm going to make another function, and I'm just going to call this update UI. And I'm going to leave a note here that's going to say forces level scene to update UI. And so then rather than us saying that it just equals 80, we're going to say that it equals current HP. And then we also want to update everything else in relation to our UI. So our current scene dot player health bar, and then we're going to set this to our max value. We're going to set that to our max HP, and then we're going to take our current scene XP bar, and we're going to set our max value to target XP, and we're going to set our current scene XP bar dot value to our current XP. So now we can call this update UI function anytime that our player takes damage, gains experience points, levels up. Oh, we need to add that in. Anytime there's going to be any change to that, we can just call this. It'll update all of it. Some of it'll be unnecessary, but it's going to be so irrelevant. You know, it's just changing a single value that it doesn't matter that we're updating some things that don't always need to be updated. We're also, we're going to need to set our current scene, our level label, and then we're going to need to update the text of it to say LVL, and then we're going to add to a string. So with strings, this is some text that we're starting off with, and then we can use the add to concatenate, or basically just add more on to the end of this string. And so we're going to add our player level, but our player level is of type integer. So we have to use this function here, str string, to turn this integer into a string so we can actually concatenate it, print our whole level. And then in our set stats, right after we do that, I'm also just going to call update UI. So now if we run our game, you'll see that we're at level 1, we're at full HP, we have no XP. Oh, and our level script is still printing the enemy list, so we can get rid of that. All right, and I think I'm going to call it there on this one. I know that our UI is not super functional yet. It's basically just there and we can update the values to it. Next time, I'll probably work on us actually getting XP from the enemy when we kill an enemy, updating that into our UI, and then actually doing something a little bit more interesting with our stats when we level up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope this is helping you all in your journey to become game devs and get to work on your own projects that you're excited about. If there's anything specific that you want me to cover or have any questions about what I've covered already, make sure to ask in the comments and I'll be sure to answer it. If you want to stay in touch with my channel or just help me out, go ahead and subscribe. I mean, what harm could it do? Have a good rest of your day. Take it easy.